WPFW, Washington. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Larry Appelbaum here with the Sound of Surprise till 6 o'clock. Today, we mark the passing of one of the pillars of the Washington, D.C. jazz community, Lawrence Wheatley, who just finished playing Weird Blues. It's from a rare, unpublished recording. I want to thank Lincoln Ross for bringing that up today. We're going to celebrate the music, the life, the legacy of Lawrence Wheatley. He touched, I think, every musician who tried to play creative music here in Washington, D.C. And we're going to talk a little bit about his life and his career, and I am joined now by people, peers and protégés, people who knew Lawrence throughout his life, and they're going to help us celebrate his memory. First of all, I want to thank Lawrence Wheatley, Lawrence's son. Lawrence is also a saxophonist. Thank you for coming up. Also thanks to Andrew White, saxophonist, scholar, and jazz entrepreneur, or maybe we should say publisher. Yeah, whatever works.
That's real good.
Yeah, okay. Also thanks to Richard Abu Spencer, percussionist, who probably goes back to the late 50s with Lawrence, yeah?
Late 50s?
Yeah, okay, we're going to talk with him. Also thanks to Peter Muldoon, guitarist, who had been working with Lawrence at the Columbia Station for the jam sessions. And then Lincoln Ross is also going to be joining us. He's sort of out in the lobby. He's got a lot of rare things that he brought up, and he's also known Lawrence for many, many years. So I guess we should try and set the stage for our listeners who really didn't know Lawrence, at least not personally, let's try to establish some basic facts. And maybe I should start with Lorenz. Lawrence Wheatley was born here in Washington, D.C.?
Yes, he was.
What year?
In 1934. December 28th. Matter of fact, Earl Father Hines was also born on December 28th.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay, so what neighborhood did he grow up in? Do you know?
Down here, I guess in the Shaw area initially, and eventually uptown, at least what I know. Of course, he preceded me, obviously, but he's spent a lot of time in the Mount Pleasant and 16th Street Heights area. He was on Meridian Place, and of course he hung out downtown where all the clubs were, off 14th Street and down and further down. So,
do you know where he went to high school?
He went to Armstrong.
Okay.
Matter of fact, he would tell me how he and Duke Ellington went to the same school, and he would say, as a matter of fact, he and Duke Ellington have something in common in as much as they never graduated from high school from Armstrong, but both of them had a very prolific career.
Armstrong produced lots of great musicians over the years, yeah? So maybe I should also turn to Andrew White. I know in your book, Everybody Loves the Sugar, there's some material about Lawrence, and I'd like to ask you how you first met Lawrence, under what circumstances, and what was your first impressions?
Okay, well, I'd like to I'm Andrew White, saxophonist and music publisher, and I'm very happy to be here to celebrate Lawrence's legacy. I'd like to precede what I'm going to read from the Sugar Book by saying that Art Blakey used to say, I heard him say this a lot on many of his gigs, please support your musicians by buying their phonograph recordings, because the record industry is the lifeblood of jazz. I don't know how many times I heard him say that, but the jam session, this is me talking now, the jam session is, I don't know whether it's before the record companies or after, but if it's after, it's the next step in terms of its importance to jazz. And Lawrence, to me, represented that for all the time I knew him. I met him in September of 1960. And so that sets the stage for this section out of my autobiography on page 250. I'd like to read 3 short sections to set everything up. It'll show how I met Lawrence and also emphasize and display his importance to jam sessions in Washington, D.C.
I think that'd be great for you to set the stage in your own voice.
Right, yeah. Okay. Again, this is page 250, and this section is called The Jam Sessions. Around the corner and 2 blocks away from Abart's at 11th and U Streets Northwest was the Bohemian Caverns. Shirley Horn, she was a singer and a pianist, and her trio were working there 6 nights a week. On Saturday and Sunday afternoons, they held matinees at the Caverns. The pianist was Lawrence Wheatley. At these sessions, visiting musicians were allowed to sit in. On Monday nights, the Shirley Horn Trio was not working, and other local groups would fill in. Lawrence Wheatley has been, and still is one of the most important figures on the Washington, D.C. jazz scene. Any number of jazz luminaries, including myself, can attest to his effort in helping to nurture and develop talent through his participation and supervision in the D.C. jazz jam session scene. He's been like the ultimate mentor in helping folks get started on many levels of this business. This next section is called Launched. It was my first Saturday afternoon matinee that really launched me in Washington, D.C. The word was already out that I was here, but sitting in with working bands is not the same, nor does it mean the same thing as playing in a jam session, which is really what those Caverns matinees were. These matinees were like showcases, and that's what I was looking for, a place to show off. Make no mistake about it. I don't care how informal the setting is, how poorly the resident rhythm section plays, or how poorly the visiting soloists play. The jam session is the most relaxed and concentrated place to show your stuff. I don't care who you are. For showcase purposes, you'll always show up better at a jam session. That's my opinion, of course. And as a band leader who is frequently looking for talent, my first choice and first place to listen and look for it is at a jam session. So let it be said, so let it be done. Here we go. Hit time. I played my first Bohemian Caverns matinee jam session with Lawrence Wheatley on the piano on a Saturday afternoon in mid-September of 1960. I made my hit on my very first solo, Dizzy Gillespie's A Night in Tunisia. I played the melody in ensemble, and when the time came for the famous four-measure break, I lit out with Lou Donaldson's break from the Art Blakey at Birdland record made in the mid-50s. That was it. I wiped out everybody and everything. When the band came back in with Lawrence sitting there at the piano, the audience was howling, screaming, applauding, and catcalling while I was playing, and it took them at least 16 bars to subside. I finished that solo, played on the rest of the tunes in the set, and that was that. One of the club owners, Tony Taylor, hit on me as soon as I came off the bandstand. He asked me if I could come back on Monday night to sit in. I said yes, came back Monday night, sat in, brought that house down, and Tony offered me the Monday night gigs. I don't remember if I ever played another weekend matinee with Lawrence Wheatley, but I played all of the Monday nights from mid-October up until the end of December of 1960. I think Tony had a method to his madness by hiring me so soon right there at that first jam session. You see, there was no admission charge at those jam sessions. So I think, and I think it's still like that now. It's changed a little bit up in New York. So I think Tony simply wanted to see and hear the reaction of paying customers on a paying gig, even if I wasn't being paid. But that was cool for me. At 18 years of age, I could afford to give up at least one gig on speculation, in a major market at that time, right? So I did, and it paid off. Over the next 2.5 months, I worked the Monday nights, built up a repertoire, built up a band, built up an audience, and built up a following. So now you're on your own for the next few pages. Check out the history of the JFK Quintet. That was the precursor. Those Monday nights were the precursor to the JFK Quintet. And
So in some ways, this helped launch your career, at least here in Washington.
it did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always thought of that. Yeah. And it was Lawrence who was running the jam sessions then. As I haven't seen Lawrence since the One Step Down closed. So that's
In fact, I used to see you at the jam sessions. You didn't play, but you were sitting in the back row at the One Step.
Like I just said, I'm a band leader.
Yeah.
Right? And so regardless of why I'm there, I am an employer, and I'm always looking for talent. I have hired some fellas, well, at least one fella, Alan Johnson, the piano player. He's worked with me for some years. And I listened to him for about 6 years at jam sessions before I hired him. I'm an elitist band leader, so I can wait as long as I want. But several band leaders can't wait 6 years.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about the jam session as a kind of creative laboratory for music. We're going to get to that. But first, I want to turn now to Abu Richard Spencer, a percussionist who has known Lawrence since when? When did you first meet Lawrence?
1959.
Why don't you come closer to the microphone?
1959, there was a club or a coffee shop at 10th and K called Coffee and Confusion. And that was the ultimate jam session. Nobody got paid, but we all loved to play. And we went through, went in and out from the time it opened until the time it closed, and it closed at 4 o'clock, sometimes even 6 o'clock in the morning. So that meant that the musicians who worked at the regular gig had a chance to come by and play also. That's how I met Lawrence, and at the same time, the supreme bassist, what is his name? I'm trying to think of the bass player that worked with J.J. Johnson at the time. But anyway, Lawrence.
Butch Warren?
No, it wasn't Butch. It was
Keter Betts or
Wilbur Little.
Oh, yeah.
Wilbur Little and Lawrence were at that point involved with each other, and I met Lawrence and Wilbur at the same time. Now, what I was at that time was a young fellow who had just left the United States Air Force and starting to play again, because that interrupted my playing, which began back in 1953, 3 at Cardozo High School with the classical involvement, on to North Africa and the primitive, so to speak, and back home. And now what we're going to do, I don't know. But the club was owned by someone that I had grew up with, Angelo Alvino and Bill Walker were the owners at that time. So I was sort of welcome to just circulate. And in came Lawrence and his involvement, which at that time was the mentoring that Andrew just spoke of. He was always a very friendly person, always wanting to help you, and always willing to play with anyone, even those that couldn't play any better than I could at the time. And that so it was with Wilbur. Wilbur taught me just by being friendly. And so as it goes, to make a long story short, which is a very hard thing to do, Andrew has said it all. And there's not very much more that I can say after what Andrew just said about the jam session and how musicians who are trying to find a place to play, even though they're not working, they want to keep playing, because who's going to employ you if you don't have some place to display your effort?
That's a good point.
Yeah, and that's what the jam session was about. And so that makes Lawrence the giant in this area that has always kept something like that going to the day that I was involved with him at the One Step Down as his drummer, because a fellow drummer was killed, and I was sitting in there just like we do now right down here on 18th Street. The jam session is still on, and Lawrence's name is still there, his spirit is still there, and I'm still doing the same thing. As a bongo player or as a hand drummer, Tony Taylor told me, son, you better get yourself a set of drums because you ain't gonna never get any work.
Ouch.
You know, and for the most part, that's not necessarily for all hand drummers. If you're in the Latin community, it's not. But if you're in the bebop community, in fact, I have something here by Chano Pozo. It's very seldom that anyone wants another drummer when they already have a drummer.
That's
so
right.
it's a hard life for a hand drummer. But Lawrence was always the fellow that gave me a chance to play. And secondly, when I got that set of drums and practiced hard, eventually one day he gave me a gig at the One Step Down as his drummer for the session. And that began a run for me toward the top, because eventually Lawrence took me with him as we worked with Charlie Rouse and Little Johnny Coles and so forth and so on. I even got a chance to work with Big Nick Nicholas because Lawrence had given me that opportunity to play. And that's what's it's so important. You know.
Well, again, this is the theme we're coming back to, is that he opened the doors for a
For
lot of
many-
people
for many-
to walk through.
many.
I'm going to ask a couple things. First of all, if you could just avoid sort of tapping on the table, because it's like, I feel like I'm,
Okay.
in the echo chamber here.
Okay.
Secondly, pull the curtain aside. Tell me, how does a jam session work? On the surface, on a superficial level, it just sounds like people walk in the door with their horn and start to play. But what role does the leader of a jam session actually play? What did Lawrence do to run the jam session?
Yes.
Why don't we begin with Lawrence?
Well, before I go on, I just want to extend my thanks to the many folks who've already called me and wished my condolences. So all of those out there in the Washington community, I thank you, and my family thanks you. We should probably mention just once again, because people have just joined us. The football game just ended, so people are just joining us. We are helping to celebrate the memory and the legacy of Lawrence Wheatley, who passed away last Sunday at the age of 73. So, Lawrence, you were saying. So, and that includes my extended family here, sitting here and out there in the community. But I came to this experience somewhat late. I decided I wanted to be a musician around 14, and I'm sitting here next to my idol, Andrew White, here. My father bought me a alto saxophone, and he introduced me to Andrew. But Lawrence would have his jam sessions. I knew him mainly to present his own music because he was a very prolific writer. But of course, jam sessions also include playing a lot of straight ahead standards. So it's a matter of being literate in the standard repertoire, and from bebop to ballads and all of those things. And you learn certain formulas in terms of harmonic progressions and superimpose them upon different changes. Well, those are changes that are superimposed on different songs, or you can compose a song based on harmonic formulas that way. So I remember initially my first jam session was down at the piano shop on 18th Street towards Florida Avenue, and that was exclusively for musicians. It wasn't a club. It was very crowded in there, and that was even predating Columbia Station.
So he did the jam sessions at this piano
shop. Yeah.
Then he went to Columbia Station.
Well,
and then the One Step.
Well, obviously he did Bohemian Caverns,
yeah.
which I had, and I've heard him make references to Abarts and the like.
Yeah.
But my first experience was at the piano shop, and then yes, he went to the Columbia Station. And then he would take me to places like Top of the Foolery, which was the first time I saw Andrew play, and I was like just mesmerized and wild, and I said, okay, I think I want to try this.
So Andrew White, what exactly does the head of a jam session do? In fact, he called it a jazz workshop.
That's it. I was going to say that. The jam session, there are several different types of jam sessions, several different motivations for people to participate and just go and witness. Primarily, I just go to witness. As a band leader, I'm looking for a particular energy level that's sort of comprehensive in a player. I should be able to sit there and listen to somebody play. You can't say how long it takes to draw a conclusion on somebody, but if you're looking to hire somebody, you're looking for certain things in their playing. And I believe that you can only get that at a jam session because there's so much spontaneity involved and so many factors that nobody knows. That's the main thing. How can you survive this and this and this through this minefield? And that's what I'm looking for. Several people that I know are not interested in that approach at all, but that's what I'm personally looking for. The interaction between the musicians who don't know each other, or if they know each other, but it really doesn't matter. But the point is, it is not a prime time gig or performance that we normally think of when we pay a cover and 2-drink minimum, so on and so forth. So the kind of exuberance, whether it's conscious or unconscious, that comes through in the playing is what I'm looking for in a jam session. Now I know while Lorenz was speaking, workshop, that was the term that came up. I don't remember how long ago, but it was been some years ago. I used to hear Lawrence refer to what I thought of the jam session as a workshop.
Are these interchangeable terms?
No, they're not. The workshop, Lawrence would bring in music. He wasn't doing that at the Caverns when I played with him. But at the One Step Down, I used to go a lot, and I'd see him there. And he'd bring in his material, and then sometimes he'd have material from other people. And then he had a structure as to who could play and when, and he would announce them and maybe sometimes say a few things about them. It would be sort of like a quasi presentation. That was not indicative of what I used to know as a jam session.
Well, the workshop was more clinical,
right,
as opposed to just merely jamming.
Yeah, now
especially Lawrence's workshop.
Right. So when it comes, that's why it changed for me as a spectator when I started going like in the 70s to check out who's playing. Then from what I did that one time in September of 1960. I felt very fortunate when I sat in down there. I don't remember how it came about, but I went and I played. But I do remember this. Lawrence called a night in Tunisia. I don't know whether he was setting me up with that break or not, but I'm sure Lawrence didn't know this. I never talked to him about it. I knew Charlie Parker's break. Don't remember this. I was 17 or 18, just coming up from Nashville. I knew Charlie Parker's break, the famous alto break, and I also knew Lou Donaldson's break. Everybody knows Charlie Parker's break, but Lou Donaldson's break has much more pizzazz to it, and that's what I was looking to do, just to show off. So I played his break, and I achieved a success, which to this day, I'm sure I would not have gotten if I had played Charlie Parker's break and have everybody singing with me.
Well, Andrew White has always played with pizzazz.
Yeah,
I think we can say that.
But that was a split decision on my part maybe 2 beats before I played it because I was thinking up until that point, I said, well, wait a minute now. You know, if they hear me playing Bird Solo, they're going to think I'm great, you know. But wait a minute. Bird Solo doesn't have this leap in it that Lou Donaldson has. You know, and I said, let me take the chance on that leap. And in the spirit of the spontaneity of a jam session, I chose it like that, to do that. And I went ahead and did it. Oh, did it. I just touched the button. You go.
Cool.
In a split second, I did that, and that's what kicked off, as far as I'm concerned, that's what kicked off my career in jazz on a national level.
Okay. We're going to continue this conversation about Lawrence Wheatley, about his music. I want to get into what he was like as a piano player, as a composer, and what he represented to the community here. But I'd like to also listen to some music, because this is what he leaves behind in many respects. And some of you remember, and I'm saying you, by you I mean the people out in the audience, will remember a group that Lawrence had. I think it was an octet, and it was called Homemade Jam. And I don't know if this was put together just for this concert. Lawrence, you were at this concert, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember the date?
No.
This is 80s, though.
Yeah.
Mid-80s?
It was the 10th and G. Congregational Church was no longer there. I just found
it's near the library.
Library, yeah.
It was
It's
right
a big
next
hole
to
there now.
Oh, really?
So,
okay.
I just found this out about 2 weeks ago, but at any rate.
Okay, so I remember that concert, and in fact, if I reach over, I can tell you who was on that show. There were 4 saxophonists. Roger Woods played alto, 2 tenor saxophonists, Buck Hill and Ron Holloway. The baritone saxophonist was Charlie Young. 2 trumpets, Keith Holmes and Victor Stein. Lincoln Ross, from whom we're going to hear in just a moment, on trombone. David Jernigan was the bassist, Winard Harper, the drummer, and there were 2 vocalists, Ruby Ellis, and the man we're going to hear next, Napoleon Turner. And, of course, the pianist and composer is Lawrence Wheatley. This is his group, Homemade Jam, and a piece titled Chutzpah.
Yes, yes. You eavesdrops on the thing I say, gossip about the things I do, and you got the nerve to say I'm crazy. Well, I'm not crazy about you. I don't have to be crazy, baby, just 'cause I'm out of your mind. But I'll admit I had better sense before you treated me unkind, yeah. You meddled in my business. Your own business is not straight. Your words are full of peace and love, but your actions full of hate, baby. Just 'cause I'm out of your mind. But I'll admit, sweetheart, I had better sense before you treated me so unkind, so unkind, so unkind, so unkind. Yes, yes. Oh, yeah. Yes, yes.